Hello, welcome to Not Another Recruitment Podcast, another podcast about recruitment. I'm your host, James Goddard, and I'm joined today by two amazing people, Georgie Hunter and Jack Spencer. Jack, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'd love to. My name is Jack Spencer. I am the co-founder at Club Redondo. When I'm not working on Club Redondo, I also run a business called Free Flexer, which helps organisations tap into the flexible workforce revolution through bespoke operation and strategy services. I've spent the last 10 or so years in the people and technology space, and before that, the sort of media and technology space. So really, most of my career has been at that intersection between media, technology, and people.
Cool. Thank you very much for that, Jack. And Georgie?
Yeah, and I'm Georgie Hunter, and for the last sort of 20 years, I've been building recruitment businesses in both the UK and New York. And met one fateful day, Jack, and together we came up with Club Redondo. So I'm now the co-founder of Club Redondo, and we are building this fantastic community. Awesome.
Well, I read the website before hopping on this, and you've got a lovely story about how you kind of came together and launched it. I'll let you tell that. I suppose the first question I had is, why the name? Why Club Redondo? Where did that come from, and what was the thinking?
I think because Jack was taking the mickey on, if you've heard the story,
cheeky,
then we went to Coney Island. It was a blustery October day. We stopped by one of the bars as it was opening, got a squeezy pint, and he said, joked that we were both in Redondo daycare and were looking after each other while we were out of work, and joked that we should start a club, Club Redondo. So that's where it came from.
Cool. And hot dogs and hope, I think, was mentioned.
Hot dogs and hope. It really started as an excuse because my partner was busy at work and Georgie and I were both at a loose end, completely unemployed. It did start as a club. Somehow that core value has stayed with us throughout the whole journey. We lean into this idea of redundancy not being something to be ashamed of. It's something to lean into. There's a big opportunity waiting for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I went through redundancy once a long time ago, and it's a horrible place to be, isn't it? You lose a bit of faith in yourself, and then you lose the structure of working and getting up and going to work. And you start doubting yourself, and then the longer you are in that state, the less confidence you have, and the less you believe in yourself. So it's really nice that you've created like a community to give people that kind of sense that, I'm not in it alone. There are other people out there, and actually it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's something that everyone goes through, and often it has nothing to do with you as an individual. It's just the business. So yeah, good for you. I think that's a really nice touch.
I think the word itself is rubbish, to be made redundant. It basically, redundant means that you're surplus to requirements. So it is a bit of a arrow to the heart the first time it happens. But we've got loads of great redundos now where, they might have been made redundant 3 or 4 times. And they're like, yeah, it's great. It's an opportunity for reassessment and redirection, and only good things come from it. That's the overwhelming leaving feeling that people get, is that this is going to be good for me.
Yeah. That pattern of sort of feelings and behaviours that you just mentioned, James, are almost ubiquitous across the Redondo community. That feeling of displacement, lack of community. You go from being part of the furniture somewhere to completely isolated, like almost to a man. I think everybody said something along those lines. And that's why the sort of one of the core tent poles here is community. It might sound a bit thin from a business perspective, but actually what it is the thing that differentiates us between so many other groups and organizations and like services that operate in this sector.
Yeah, I like the idea of you taking back the word as well, because as you say, redundant, it's a very strange word to use because it's saying that you as a person are useless, basically, or you've been replaced by something of more use. So you are.
Yeah, it's not kind, is it? It's not very kind.
It's not at all. It's a really jagged, kind of like quite brutal word, isn't it? So the fact that you've played with it and you've made it a bit fun, not to make it a light-hearted thing, because obviously it's a serious thing to go through. But you're kind of taking the word back, aren't you, for people?
Yeah. It's all about shifting that attitude.
We can't be afraid of it. That's the point, I think. And that's why we often talk about being shit canned or push through the cat flap of redundancy, because it's happened. And to some extent, as an adult, a professional adult, you're going to have to swallow that and get back on your feet and move on. So we're not afraid of it at all. It does lead us into some of the interesting territory around the brand, I suppose. I think it's not polarizing, right, Georgie, but most people love it. And some people are like, I'm not going to join something where I'm walking around on LinkedIn saying I'm a Redundo. Thank you very much. And there is different paradigms at play there, I suppose. Different types of people lean into it, but you don't have to be for everyone.
Yeah, it's Marmite. And, in the US, Redundo that's not what they say. They say laid off. So it is a very British thing to be called redundant. I personally like that it's polarizing because it really does make it easy to find the people that think, you know what, I want something different for myself. I'm not going to be embarrassed by the fact that I've been made redundant because it isn't a reflection of me or my personality.
Yeah,
it's actually the nature of the industry at the moment. Like economics are completely taking businesses for a ride in terms of uncertainty. I don't think many business owners can actually predict what's going to happen in the future. And so they're having to be reactive and make decisions based on what they think might happen. And sadly, people are being affected by this in this great shuffle of talent.
Yeah, indeed. And also, if you look back into 2021 and 2022, there was probably a spate of overhiring from a lot of businesses that kind of thought that the good times would never end.
Yeah.
The whole the economic model has changed fundamentally since COVID, which, it had changed. There was transformation, but it wasn't like the whole world had changed on a pinpoint. So, that overhiring and then turning around and telling people they're redundant, maybe, it's good to shine a spotlight back on the business and have more ethical and considered hiring practices. But I think people are there now. I think people are a lot more careful about hiring and committing to permanent employees because there is that responsibility from employers to who they hire to make sure there are roles there beyond 6-12 months and they're not having to go through endless rounds of redundancy that we have seen in the industry over the last few years.
Is that what you're seeing, James, at the moment? This like more temp to perm? Or
yes, it's interesting. So I get the stats through from REC. It's a really good study, actually. So I'll shout out to them. They share it with us for free. They're called North Star People. They're like a management consultancy in the recruitment industry. And there's a monthly survey produced by KPMG and REC. And it basically gives you what's going on with all the vacancies that are being reported in the UK. And you can see that permanent hiring has basically decreased month on month. And it's something crazy like 48 months of decreasing permanent hiring. And the decreasing has become less market, so it's become slower. So it's not dropping as fast, but it's still decreasing, still below that bar, whilst temp hiring has recovered. So I think people, when they're hiring now, are thinking more consciously and they're going, okay, is it a freelancer? Is it someone fractional? Is it someone on an FTC? Because we don't want to make a commitment we can't see through. And they don't want budgets to remain for 2-3 years. So if you're hiring a permanent person, you're impacting the budget and the P&L for 2 or 3 years in your forecasts. Whilst if you're doing a freelancer, you're bringing them in, they're doing 3 or 6 months the work that you need, and then you can think about it at that point whether you still need them. So that was a really long, boring way of saying, yes, that is what I'm seeing. But
it's not boring. I think that's really interesting. Yeah. I see similar trends in, like, with my other hat on, when I talk about the flexible workforce, there's all of the drivers behind the sort of business decisions that we made, like risk and cost. But underneath their feet, the workforce is also shifting, and this plays into Club Redondo significantly. Workers want different types of things now. Their priorities and incentives have changed. It's not all just about package. It's about things like work-life balance. It's about autonomy and control, and people are more likely to go independent or fractional earlier in their career. We're seeing Gen Z sort of more than ever before turning to things like side hustles and independent working models because trust and is maybe a bit eroded.
I think why I find it interesting, James, is we are definitely seeing that people are getting more opportunities not through job adverts. So
okay, that's interesting.
And I guess if that information is tracking vacancies, like online vacancies, then it doesn't speak to the rest of the market, does it, in terms of what someone referred to as backdoor hiring, which sounds kind of weird, but this idea that you get a role that isn't even advertised. And I would say that that's the parallel that I've seen with all of the people that I was made redundant with, that in the most cases, they haven't applied to a job description. They have reached out to their network. They have explained what their strengths are, and people have created jobs for them. And they're not jobs that are wildly different to what the business structure looks like, but that is how I'm seeing a lot of people get roles, is either is through their own means or through relationships with recruiters who have those relationships and are what I would call reverse marketing people to companies where they know change is happening. And so I find that so interesting is, is that reality, or is that the job? Is it there's something breaking with the way jobs are advertised?
I would agree with you. And I've remarked on it looking at the figures, because I think they probably communicate a sentiment. So they are tracking reality, but I don't think there's an exact overlap between the amount of vacancies posted and the amount of actual vacancies that exist. And anecdotally, I'd also agree that a lot of people that I've known that have maybe been in that position that are looking for work, they'll get opportunities through their network or through trusted recruiters that they'll work with. And then those are the conversations that happen. From a recruitment agency perspective, it's actually very difficult to navigate adverts, because the amount of applicants now for adverts, especially through LinkedIn, is very challenging to manage properly, because you will get 200, 300, 400 applicants. And obviously you are committed to responding to them all, to reviewing them all, but there is a degree of automation there. And it must be very challenging as a job seeker to go up against that, because you want recruiters to look at the CV. Sometimes they will, but at the same time, there will be gates that will be plugged into an ATS or LinkedIn recruiter, in terms of a search or certain keywords that are inputted to cut that down, because it's sometimes not possible to read 500 profiles. You're nodding, Jack. So
it resonates. So with Club Redondo, there's this sort of community column that's really important to the business. And then we run these back to work sprints, which are a methodical approach to finding your next gig. Like, this isn't magic. It's more like Moneyball, right? It's how do you get yourself into that 10% of candidates that can get in the room face to face and have an interview, or online have an interview. We're constantly just trying to talk to people about how do you differentiate yourself? How do you get into that gap? And when you say 200, 300 applications for a job ad on LinkedIn, that's the exact message we're trying to give to our community, because how do you work smarter? How do you penetrate? How do you become a person and actually manage to sort of evangelize about your worth to someone? Really difficult to do that from a pile of 400 other PDFs.
No, I was just going to say, it's two challenges really that we see. One is, are people getting interviews? So with that, there's often a lot of confusion around, is it my CV? What could I be doing? And I think with generally the level of applications you're talking about, it is hard to get through all of them. And so one of the things that would be amazing to give job hunters is, has my CV even been seen? Because then it's personal, not personal, is it? If your CV hasn't been seen, then it's not personal. If it has been seen and rejected, there's more you could do there. I think if you're getting interviews, then it's more about the actual way that you're selling yourself and communicating yourself to the person. So this back to work sprint basically tackles everything from are you communicating clearly what it is that you want? Do you know what you want? How are you strategizing and planning and mapping your job hunt? Through to then the tactics of what does your CV look like? What does your LinkedIn look like? What are you actually saying in interviews? How are you preparing for those, etc.? So it flows through what we see as the key pillars of getting yourself a new opportunity.
It sounds like you're giving some really good advice there, because that's another thing that people forget. It's actually the LinkedIn profile, especially if you're going through LinkedIn ads. That's actually the first thing recruiters see. So they'll have to open the CV as a doc that will be sitting against your name. But the thing they'll see is your profile picture, your tagline, and then maybe 2 or 3 little bits of summary experience about where you've worked. Yeah. And that needs to be on point. That's kind of like your elevator pitch, your 5-second elevator pitch to get the recruiter to then open the CV.
100%. That's the exact sort of terminology we're using. We almost see it, I do anyway, I almost see it as B2B sales in that sense of if you can't distill down immediately and succinctly why you're brilliant, how capable you are, and what you bring to a business and their culture, then then why you? That's a really good That's what recruiters or hiring managers will say.
What James, what are you seeing in terms of the proportion of companies who use ATS systems? Because I hear a lot of, I think it's noise, because I don't remember loads of companies using ATS systems. Instead, we had to put them in the ATS system once we found the candidate, but it wasn't doing the searching, filtering, sifting. They were using it for almost monitoring who we should pay recruitment fees to, because we've got that candidate, we've not got that candidate. What are you seeing?
That's a great question. And there'll be recruiters watching this probably shouting at the screen because I'm going to explain it in a
I'd love
really
to hear from
stupid
you.
way. Yeah. In the comments, please tell me if you think I'm wrong. So obviously, it's just anecdotal. So I think there's probably 3 layers of maturity in the ATS adoption. So there's people that don't have one. So there's still lots of companies out there that just don't have an ATS. And you've got job ad responses just popping into an inbox. And then they're doing whatever with the response. Is that good from a GDPR perspective, from a candidate experience perspective? No, but it's just simply what it is, because if it's a small business or a very old business that maybe isn't that mature technologically, then that's just the state of play. You'll then have businesses like you were saying, Georgie, that will have an ATS, and the ATS is going to be interfacing with the recruitment. So the PSL are going to be putting CVs onto that ATS. You're going to have the internal TA team putting CVs onto that ATS as well, but it's more of like a log of what's going through, and then they're using it to do stuff like set up interviews, send out contracts, and it's making life easier, and it's storing the information, but it's not really doing any filtering. The filtering is all happening probably at a human level through the recruitment team or the agency that are then using their experience, their skills. Maybe some filtering on LinkedIn. If people are getting 500 responses to a job, they might put a Boolean into the LinkedIn ad to search the LinkedIn response to then bring up a short list of 20 or 25 CVs instead of 500. But it's not like overly automated. There are, however, a wave of products coming in at the moment and some amazing ATSs that are now layering in automation and workflow management. So LinkedIn have got a pilot going now, which is kind of an auto recruiter kind of chat functionality that allows it to sort through applicants, select applicants, create shortlists for recruiters that are interfacing with it. And there are other ATSs like Ashby that are very, very advanced that are using AI to screen candidates as well. And I think that's probably where the kind of the direction of travel is going, towards more automation, towards more kind of AI functionality, cutting down on kind of paperwork, admin, recruiter time. And you've got recruitment teams shrinking as well. So, I appreciate Club Redondo, you do redundancies across all markets. You help people from any background. But from a talent perspective, I work with lots of amazing people in talent that have been looking for jobs or been out of work because the industry has shrunk. And you've got teams now that are using tools instead of talent partners. And that's something that I think is going to stay. So the industry's kind of shrunk. It will expand again slowly, but it will never probably be where it was in 2021, 2022.
Yeah.
There you go. That was a lot of my own opinions put out there.
I'm delighted to finally get under the skin of the 3 layers of maturity around ATSs. Thank you, James.
There you go. Yeah. Didn't think I'd be saying that today. Yeah.
We all had dreams as children, didn't we? That was yours.
Yeah. Mine was to get on a podcast and talk about the layers of maturity in ATSs. I've done it.
If it's any consolation, I think you're spot on. I've seen all 3 of those in the flesh, those different layers. But I do think there's great application of AI in that space at the moment, and then there's some really crap sort of AI agentic stuff that doesn't do what it says it does. But I think the ability to draw all of those CDs and candidates down almost into an LLM and then question and interrogate it and work with it, rather than making the decisions, but serving up the sort of top tier of candidates based on your criteria and through having conversations is a really cool idea. But you can see how that would impact entry-level jobs in recruitment or even mid-level jobs in recruitment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the kind of talent coordinators, people setting up interviews, it was really important in the TA industry because a lot of people, if they don't work agency side, or even if they do, that's the first job that they get internal because it's a relatively junior job that they can learn the ropes and get more experience and get interfacing with more complex things in TA.
Yeah.
Those roles are starting to kind of drift away because of automation in terms of setting up interviews.
It's one of the trends that drives Redondo because we've done the research around what causes spikes in redundancy. We saw them in like 2008, and we saw them in 2020, obviously. And there's some things that are outside of the realms of like patterns, but often economic uncertainty and technological disruption create these massive spikes in redundancy. So all you have to do is really open any newspaper and go on any blog about AI, and you will see that both of those pillars bad for society, but we are expected to see more and more redundancy, younger and younger types of people being sort of displaced, particularly in this first sort of revolution of AI impacting industry. There is a lot of data about how impactful some of these pilots are. So I expect to see a second or third wave where actually a lot of those entry-level roles bounce back. What it does mean is that people are having to learn a new set of skills around hunting for jobs much earlier in their careers and thinking about what their career path looks like, because the days of it being a long, straight, diagonal line are long over.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's an interesting one because actually what you're doing is you're tying Club Redondo to greater themes in the market, and there will be so much disruption as AI becomes increasingly complicated and sophisticated and able to do the jobs that I'm doing and everyone's doing. And it almost needs to be a link between governments and organisations like yours, really, to help repurpose people and point them in the right direction. Because there's still lots of areas that need people. It's just that it's going to change, and people probably need a bit of help navigating that, especially if they've never had to do it before.
Yeah,
it's a common one, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, Jack.
No, so I was going to say it's a common comment from Redundos is I've been employed since I was 15 or 16. I've had a couple of jobs. Last time I had to look for a job, I printed out my CV and put it through someone's letterbox. Right. So it's like they've come out of a job hunting time machine and they have no idea where to start. And these are brilliant, bright people that have worked at the big consultancies or legal firms or big media and creative agencies. These are very capable, smart, brilliant professionals, but they don't have this skill set because they've never had to do it. And that's changing, unfortunately.
I think, students were taught, weren't they? They said, told even, to go and learn computer science. And now we're basically saying, don't do that. That's not a good shout, actually. We've got AI to do that. And the thing that we're seeing, I think, most commonly is that emotional fitness is the difference between the speed at which somebody will find their new opportunity. Because imagine you have something you've worked for 5 years doing.
What do you mean by emotional fitness, Georgie? That's really interesting.
So what I mean by that is the ability to take a knockback, like the fact you might have studied computer science for the last 5 years, look at the market and say they don't need as many computer scientists as we've got coming out of university. So what else am I going to do? I've either got to be the best of the best, like top 1%, in which case, if that's what you want to go for, you've got to work out how you beat out everybody else and be the best. Or you've got to be realistic and say, this is gutting. I've spent money, time, energy learning about this thing, but it isn't the future. And the quicker that I can come to terms with that and then think, right, where could those skills now be attributed? The quicker I will then be able to find new opportunities. And this is why, like, the World Economic Forum talks about agility and resilience being in those top 10 skills that everybody should have. Because I think the rate of change is happening at such a pace that if you don't have the ability to transition through your own emotions to get to a place where you can move forwards. So we're starting to talk about things like the change curve now. You're going to be left behind. And that, I think, is where people with good emotional intelligence and good emotional fitness will win out. And it can be learned. Some people are naturally born with it. Some people are taught it through their environment. They get lucky, they get good parents. But some people will have to learn it for themselves. And there's like a great book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, that was like the start of my journey of learning about emotional intelligence. And I'd recommend it to anybody. They have a little quiz in the book. It tells you where you're at. And then a year later, it comes back after giving you some tools and techniques to put into practice to retest you, and you see the progress you've made. But I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but I do see it as
very, very, very interesting.
Critical. Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think emotional intelligence is often considered to be like very static. So people are, they've got low EQ or, that's just something you can't do anything with. And as someone who probably isn't very good at managing people, but used to be really bad at managing people, I know you can improve your EQ. You just have to work on it, just like any other skill. Yeah, you listen, you have to be more empathetic, and there's loads of things that you can do to improve it. So just putting people on a, kind of a trash pile and saying, oh, low EQ, they're never going to improve because it's just an inherent trait. Yeah, I disagree there. I think you can work on it. And it's an interesting book that you talked about.
I'll give you an example of a sort of Redondo anecdote where this applies, because I think people are often, as you said at the start, people have their confidence knocked, right? And it's difficult for Club Redondo to impart confidence on someone. We're not therapists. we're coaching you as best we can. So
you were giving me a bit of therapy earlier, Jack, I think just before we started though. So I quite like that.
About letting people in at junctions.
Well, there was that very philosophical letting people in at junctions, and then you would say always try and be a 10, because if you're not, you kind of make everyone, you lift everyone up.
I've got no time for people that honest answer the question, how are you honestly? I think it's rude to say anything other than 10. But we had a Redondo once, and she was really smart. She was transitioning into a different sector, into like a more web 3.0 space. And she had a real interest in it. She had worked on loads of projects around it. She kept getting to interview stage because her background was really solid. And then she was just burning out at interviews. And she'd done all the prep. She'd done the work. She'd put the sort of fundamentals in place so that, she could talk about herself. She could talk about the business. She could talk about the role. She'd done all that work, but she just couldn't get through the interview process. And where Club Redondo tries to support is to start to interrogate, okay, well, how else are you preparing for that stuff? And I think this speaks to both of your points around, this isn't woo-woo, there's mechanical things you can do to help your brain succeed in these spaces. So we talk about things like mindfulness, like how are you putting yourself in a best sort of front foot forward position to go into that room in a calm, relaxed sort of state with gravitas. And she hadn't done any of the prep work into thinking about what makes me feel good. How do I digest information and then, recall it more efficiently? So we sort of came up with a little program of well, why don't, if this works for you, if you need to learn it the day before, go for a walk, and then in the morning, empty stomach, maybe have one coffee, 10 minutes of like exercise, and then you're ready. Put those fundamentals in place. Everyone that performs at some level, whether that's in a meeting or a musician or an actor, everyone will have a process to get centered and grounded in that moment. As I say, it's not woo woo. This is just brain mechanics stuff that you can do to improve your confidence in that space. We can't help you be more confident, but we can talk to you about techniques that ground and center you and put you in a position to win in those spaces.
You can help unlock someone's potential, I suppose. They need to still do it.
They've got it's in there, right? It's in there. Lots of people just need help about what's the structure of showing someone it. I think we've all been in meetings or job interview settings where you've come out and you thought, I didn't really show someone my best side there. Either I was too nervous or flustered, or I didn't understand a question, or I messed up an answer. It's how do you transition through those spaces to get the best results? And that's this sort of equipment we're trying to give people. It's a toolbox. It's like a methodology of actions you can take.
And often, colleagues that we've worked with historically are not brave enough to tell us. And I think the community is creating a safe place for us to be mirrored, for us to see the reflection that we are projecting to the world. And I think the confidence comes from taking small progressive steps, but it's all the things that we learn when we learn about selling. And I think we do it in recruitment without thinking about it. But ultimately we're taught, how do you command gravitas in a client meeting? How do you prepare for that so that you go in and you don't ask a ton of stupid questions? And so I think what we're translating is, for those people that are not fortunate enough to have worked in recruitment or sales, how do you translate those skills?
Fortunate indeed.
What? You think fortunate, you think unfortunate?
Well, I think obviously Jack's probably thinking unfortunate. But I think you make a really good point as well, because there's so many people undervalue the training that they get in a recruitment role, because they often think, I had a very intelligent colleague once tell me we were a bit like greyhounds. We were just trained to do one thing, and that's the only thing we could do, just race around a track. And I was kind of like, yeah, kind of, but also
you're really good at it though.
Really good at it. Yeah, super, super good at it. And also, there's loads of transferable skills. I've always laughed whenever I see people that I've worked with negotiating on like a house sale or buying a new car or, getting into a relationship for the first time, there's loads of skills that you pick up in a recruitment role that allow you to ask great questions, read people, understand empathetically as well as intellectually. So there's lots of stuff you learn in a sales or a recruitment role that you can then use in your real life. And we forget that some people are not exposed to that. So they might be absolutely amazing in their craft, top level leaders or experts, but they've not got that exposure, so they can't really sell themselves. So it sounds like that's kind of what you're also helping people with.
Yeah. I think what comes with creating opportunities for yourself is the ability to sell yourself. And I don't want to get too salesy on our Redundos, because I think most people feel a bit sick when they hear the word sales. But it is about, I was thinking about my mum. She went to elocution lessons and was taught how to stand properly and, command a room and things like that. And actually, those sorts of basics are fundamental for people. It's walking into an interview and shaking someone's hand and them feeling like, oh, this is going to be an interesting conversation without you having to say anything. So, I don't want to get into technical, but I do think there's something about if you learn to sell yourself and you learn to create opportunities for yourself, regardless of what the market hits you with, you're going to be okay because you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I feel like Georgie's mum is 400 years old, by the way. That's why she's...
Sounds like a very impressive person, to be fair.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I remember one of the first bits of sales training I ever had was they got me to do a presentation about the recruitment agency I was working with. So obviously super fascinating, but they recorded it. So they took a video recording of the presentation and then played it back. And it's so interesting seeing all the crazy stuff you do that you're not even aware of it, like your legs and your hands and your face and where your eyes are going. And actually you're like, I'm saying stuff that is good, but I look crazy. I look like I'm not really in the moment or really connecting with the person. And then you realize all the layers to communication that exist beyond just what you're saying. And absolutely, people miss that in interviews, and people that do well and perform well in interviews, they keep cool, like you're saying, Jack, and they're able to kind of give themselves that space and that time before the interview to go in and unleash that potential. But they're also, in the interview, they've got that kind of command and control of what they're doing, how their voice is sounding, where their eyes are focused, the handshake, all of those soft skills are so important as well.
Yeah. I think like we've seen this work. So we feel quite validated. We've been doing this for over 12, 14 months now, George, and we've seen dozens and dozens of people go through that sprint and find roles. That example I gave you earlier, she's now gainfully employed in the sector that she wanted to be.
That's awesome.
I mean, we know that it works. That interview piece is also really interesting. I think that we also sort of told them a bit about the dynamic and how it doesn't have to be sort of teacher pupil. You are allowed to ask questions, and you are allowed to dismantle the structure that they present to you if you're not comfortable with it. And you're allowed to say things like, what will help you understand the best attributes about me? Can I tell you, this is a really great way to get to know me, like that kind of stuff. Like that, it doesn't have to be one directional. It can be. So we sort of break from those taboos. I think that's where Georgie's experience of like having interviewed and recruited thousands of people over the years is so useful, because we just help them see it from the other side's perspective. If you know what is motivating a recruiter in that space, it's going to put you in a better space to answer their questions and allay those fears. And Georgie talks a lot about de-risking hires, and I think that's a really valuable insight for candidates to understand. Like, obviously, from a candidate's perspective, your only objective here is to secure the role and start generating income again, typically. How do you explain to a recruiter that you're not a risk as a hire? I think it's a really useful way of...
Yeah, as someone who's also hired a bunch of people in my time, I would agree that a good interview is two-sided. And actually, some of the best interviews I've ever had, I felt they were interviewing me. So, you might start, you're 5-10 minutes in, and then they'll be asking you really deep questions about what the business strategy is. What's the makeup of the team? What can I learn here? And not in a kind of sell yourself to me type way, because that can sometimes be a bit prickly, although I'm not averse to it. But in a kind of, they're very interested in the opportunity, but they're not just waiting for you to ask questions. They're exploring it themselves. And that's a good technique to have in an interview.
Yeah, you're showing your proactiveness, aren't you, and curiosity. reacting to a question that's being asked of you. It means you have more control over the direction of the conversation. That's exactly, for me, that is selling, even though it's not like hammering someone with a pitch. For me, that's, a likable attribute. Yeah.
So imagine I'm watching this and I'm, maybe a HR director. So I run a company and I'm really interested in what you're saying, or maybe I've just been made redundant and I'm again really interested in what you're saying because you've given me some great advice. How do I connect? How do I work with you and kind of benefit from all the good stuff you say?
A dream question, James. Thank you so much.
It's almost like I prepared it ahead of the call to ask you.
We started as very much like, I suppose you'd call it B2C, really. It's a community. We go to people, we bring them into community and try and help them. We've done that all for free, by the way. We haven't charged a cent yet because we wanted to build it out, make sure it worked and put the bones into the business.
I'll be honest with you, that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in having you on. I thought it was awesome that you did so much for free just to really help people out. Obviously to kind of create the model of the business and the community that you're running, but also I can just tell that you're both really nice people and you wanted to help people. So that's really cool.
Sometimes
that's the illusion. So like, I think if anyone wants to help from a purely helping candidates perspective, like any referrals you can make into Club Redondo is absolutely fantastic. Obviously there's a sort of broad network reach here of people who know people. I think we all have people in our network with the green circle of doom on that could just use a bit of structure and accountability and support. So I think that's quite an easy ask. The B2B offering is really interesting. So this has been surprisingly well received, right? This idea of offboarding as a perk. So we're speaking to organizations with the cultural maturity to understand that shit happens. And we take what happens at the end of this journey as seriously as we do at the beginning. Businesses put a lot of emphasis on what onboarding looks like. But in today's world of sort of employer branding, there's almost no emphasis on what offboarding looks like beyond traditional like outplacement services. So organizations that are prepared to have that like mature talk, like almost on the way in, for their workers, that's our ICP. Those are the people we're going after. Selfishly, from their perspective, like this helps reduce voluntary churn post redundancies. It helps employer branding. It helps productivity. There's usually a productivity dip after a nasty cold. There's usually people that choose to jump ship because security is eroded. And don't even get me started on your Glassdoor. Like you've done this stuff.
Yeah, you pay millions of pounds to have a good employer brand, and bad redundancy can basically.
We're not asking people to do this. Exactly. We're not asking them to do it out of the goodness of their heart. But like one of the core tenets around Club Redondo is this idea of the campsite rule. And it's this idea when you're sort of camping or being outdoorsy, that whenever you go to a campsite, you leave it in a better condition when you found it for the next person. And if that happens in perpetuity, what you get is an ever improving, more beautiful place that people can camp. And we think people should do the same with human capital people, right? I think there's an obligation for companies to try and help their people, even on the way out, to like stick the landing. And what the data points at is that candidates take a massive emotional knock. They're more likely to get into financial difficulties. They're more likely to feel stresses and depression. So there's things companies can do with selfish motivators, but there's things companies can do to also help their staff on the way out the door. So yeah, from a B2B perspective, we've started having meetings and they're really, really positive because people like the idea of being able to do something to support it. So people in HR, often it overlaps with talent or ops or even finance. Like if organizations are out there that wants to think of a way that they can improve what offboarding looks like, improve company culture, for relatively like small fee per person, it feels like a really easy lift. Like we take it on, but in the market, I haven't seen anything else that like actually looks at the individual, the cultural side and the community side of what this looks like. As I say, there's outplacement, which is really, you leave one company and go into a database and maybe we find you a role, which isn't to disparage that as a service, by the way. But I just don't see anything in the space where it actually cares about the individual and their journey into the next stage.
Yeah. Both Jack and I also have made people redundant. So we know the other side of the coin.
It's an important part of the journey. You've got to make people redundant.
It is an important part of the journey. And I think it's maybe been great to get both sides of the coin, because we know that there are, businesses aren't going to stop making people redundant. you do your best as a manager or leader to get them the money they're owed as part of their contract. But the reason that people really talk about severance is what they're looking for is security. What runway do I have before I can't pay my mortgage, I can't pay my, for my kids, etc. And what people really want is to get a new job and to be able to have that ongoing security. So what we're trying to tackle is if we can help you with your sort of mindset and motivation through the job hunt, you keep you buoyant, you're more likely to find a job quicker. And part of this is then about opening those doors and using networks. If backdoor recruiting is the better way to get a job these days, like how do we connect you? How do we introduce you to new people? And that will open up more opportunities. So if we, that's kind of how we see ourselves solving the problem for corporates is you give the problem essentially to us, which is you've got to let people go, but we'll make sure they find jobs quickly, they're looked after, they regain that security. And then, your existing staff don't feel the guilt that comes with being a survivor, and your brand is seen to be looking after people, not just getting rid of a line item on a P&L.
On a spreadsheet, yeah. And it doesn't really affect brands. So you had some massive tech players that had amazing employer brands like, Meta, like Amazon. And they're not trash, but they have definitely significantly decreased. They've suffered. And people, when they're deciding on job offers, they won't look at them as these amazing places that never make redundancies and treat their staff well. They'll look at them as great payers. They'll give them lots of shares. They'll make a lot of money there. But actually, am I going to really work there for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years? Probably not, because every 2 years they make half the team redundant or 10% of the company redundant. So it's that wider kind of employer branding piece that I think is affected as well.
Yeah. How's it when people can't trust that actually you're committed to them in the same way as they are committed to you?
Yeah. And you'll see so many people that the employer didn't plan to lose leaving after redundancy. There'll be people that are going, well, I've been told, kind of confidentially by my manager that my role probably isn't at risk, but it's going through, kind of restructuring. But I'm just going to get out ahead of it because the atmosphere will go to crap. People will get really demotivated because they're seeing all their friends being made redundant. So I just don't really want to stick around in a place like this. I just don't want to take the risk.
There's a Harvard Business Review article on it, which says it's 31% increase in voluntary turnover post redundancies. Like that's an enormous number.
Huge. It's massive.
Even a fraction of that in your business can be incredibly damaging. I think I'd sort of subscribe to the idea that most businesses have sort of between 5 and 10 like world-class players that make the wheels go round. And if you lose a couple of those, you're not just losing their productivity, you're losing that experience and those expertise. So that that's not a financial risk to the business, that's an existential risk to the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to ask a couple of quick fire questions before we ended, if that was okay with both of you.
We could do quick. We've been practicing being quick and brief. You can tell.
Well, I've been failing. Yeah. So obviously you've probably seen lots of different types of redundancy. What's the best one that you've seen? How can an employer do it well?
The best way, look, the decision has to be made, and we're not about shying away from the decision. We understand the business reality side of it. The best way you can do this is to try and be as fair and transparent as possible. We always encourage redundos not to take it personally. I would always hope that businesses also don't take it personally. Often it can be quite a fractured process. So what good looks like is transparent, it's fair, it's open to negotiation. It's like any transactional partnership. You should both sort of meet in the middle and feel a little bit maybe hard done by, but that's a sign that a fair negotiation's taken place. If there's any way to leave people with money, that really helps. Like might be a bit crude, but if you're going to put someone back on the runway, it's better to do it with some cash in your back pocket. And then culturally, I've seen this. I've worked in tech for a decade, so we almost got into a 6-month cycle of redundancies, usually just before the Christmas and summer parties. That doesn't work. make your cuts once, make them deep. But if you get into a cycle of thinking you can buy people a couple of beers and they'll forget all about it afterwards, then you're not right. And so it's try and be
the pizza party meme.
It is that, and that's a lack of organisations being brave about decisions they're making. I worked for one agency once where I did a workforce audit. By the time I'd finished the audit, they'd had KPMG back in and they'd made another round of redundant. Before I'd even finished the report. Off the back of it, I was just like, this is a moving feast, which is not a good sign. Sorry, that wasn't very brief.
It's all right. That was good. I appreciate the insight. When have you seen, I suppose you've answered this one with a little bit of the context you just gave. I was going to say, when have you seen a redundancy done really badly?
Yeah.
Well, I think Zuckerberg really nailed it, didn't he? By basically saying, yeah, we fired all our underperformers. Because it just left me thinking, why did you hire this place?
That was reptilian, yeah.
Yeah. Why have you hired all?
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you've got poor hiring policies, or you don't train well. That's what I'm taking away from it. So yeah, I think don't blame the lever for the redundancy.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. You've got to have some compassion and saying that you're making redundancies because they're underperforming. That's just not true. No one believes that. You don't make 10% of your staff redundant for underperforming. And as you say, there's some serious issues with the business if you're 10% of your staff are underperformers, either in terms of management or hiring, and that reflects probably worse on you. So the other question I had was, what's some advice that people give to people that have recently been made redundant that is terrible advice that you would say is a bit of a cliche, but it's just not good advice for people?
I'm not sure about advice. The behaviour we see, mate, is people immediately start applying for jobs, 100 jobs a day, as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And it's a behaviour that just doesn't feel strategic and it doesn't feel smart. It doesn't feel like a good way to spend your time. I think people think job search equals application, and it's to us, it's really not that. It's putting all those foundations in place, all those thoughtful processes about identifying what your strengths and values are, what that sort of corporate persona looks like. Have you mapped your jobs market? Have you exhausted all of your network? Are you communicating with people outside of the LinkedIn bubble? Do the things that strategically make sense to treat it like a project, not just a fire sale where you're just like, oh my God, I need to find something immediate. Taking a more strategic route will bear fruit faster. It might not feel like it. And hey, you might always hit the jackpot, who knows? But the behavior I see time and again is people come to Club Redondo and they said, I applied for 500 jobs. I've had 2 interviews and I'm freaking out. That's almost the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing about being made redundant is other people's perspectives of you being made redundant. So I think my advice would be it doesn't matter what other people think about your redundancy. Don't worry about the pity parties that are coming towards you at the Christmas table. Oh, poor you. Oh, what will you do? This is a great opportunity. You can't change that it's happened. Hopefully the company's looked after you. If they haven't, then more good stuff is coming. I think that's the worst bit about redundancy is other people's opinions of what's happening and them being awkward about it when they don't need to be.
Yeah, I suppose that's the whole point of Club Redondo, right? Making it not an awkward thing. It's something that everyone goes through. Empower yourself, face up to it, be honest, and use it as an opportunity to move forwards and transform. Cool. Well, I really enjoyed that chat, Georgie, Jack. Yeah, that was really illuminating. I thought there were some really interesting things touched on there. So thank you very much for your time, and I can only wish you the best of luck. I think what you're doing is awesome, and I hope you get a chance to help out lots of other people in the future.
Thanks, James.
Thank you,
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, great to meet you.
Yeah, great stuff.